Right, got to, excuse me, try and knock this off in 45 minutes before lunch because I'm hungry. Um, Yesterday's ceremony, number 43, last night's rather, um, uh, pretty unpleasant for most of it because it was reliving the feelings of irritation. The whole ceremony was about irritation until it was finally resolved. Um, but I just want to log an interesting morning. We went for a boat trip to see the pink dolphins, which we did again. So, and that was everybody. The whole group went. So, but we got round the other side of the mud island, which is massive. It's got about 6 villages on it. It's in the middle of the river on the other side, and we stopped to look at a hawk. Gino said to the motor taxista, a young lad, I'd not seen him before. Well, I've seen him here, but not on the boat. And he stopped the engine, and then we couldn't restart it. He couldn't restart it. And Brandon was sat next to me, and he's after about, we were stuck. We'd been about an hour and a half, an hour or so into the trip or more. Nice bit of cloud cover, beautiful morning, but getting on for sort of 10, it started to clear, and of course it was a hot day. Nobody prepared for sunblock with sunblock. I luckily wore pants, tracksuit bottoms. We all had hats, but Colin only had shorts and a vest, so he got burnt. I got a bit of burn on my arms and my face, which is why I haven't shaved for a couple of days, because yesterday it was too sore. They were just glowing by 4 o'clock in the afternoon before ceremony. It's like, oh fuck. So I had to ask for cream and stuff. They don't have any aloe vera growing here, which is what you want. You put that sticky shit all over you, and it's really good. It's cooling. Real aloe vera cactus, but there's none here. So we had to ask the girls. They dig out like a hydratanty thing. Big, anyway. So we were okay later, but yeah, it was getting a bit. I mean, we were delayed by an hour and a half. It took that long before the fucking engine started up, and I kind of got involved sitting because the guy must have been knackered. He was just permanently pulling the engine, and the cord rotor is sticking, and you could see through the vent where they've been poking screwdrivers to try and ease off the plastic covering of where it turns the engine. So anyway, the upshot of it, this was sort of Brendan realised. He said the guy's got no. Basically, he hadn't put the spark plug back on when he took the spark plug out and was cleaning it and fucking around with it. They didn't have any tools in the bag. His spark plug spanner didn't fit properly, so he's bashing that with the fucking pliers. You're just thinking, this is just typical fucking Peruvian mentality. They know there's already an issue, it turned out, with this motor because it needs a service. It needs a new cover for the pull cord because it's bent, and they've been trying to bend it back. So of course, when he's trying to pull it, it's sticking, and you can't get a proper pull on it. So in the end, I thought, slid to the back of the boat and was kind of digging through the bag, found a spare spark plug, and then tested for a spark, which you couldn't see, probably because it's too bright though. So that was a concern, but it wasn't that in the end. So that was fun and games, but we ended up drifting downriver again and then to another little kind of island that everyone got off the boat, and I just thought, I had complete faith in them. I knew we weren't going to be left stranded, but Gino obviously probably thinking, oh fuck, it's really pushing the time now, because this went on for an hour. He wasted probably the first half an hour where he kept trying to restart it and fuck about with it, until Brandon said he's left the spark plug cap off. So I went to the back. So I said, "No, amigo, there's, the cap doesn't." Oh, thank you. So because he's probably a bit stressed himself, and then pulling this thing over and over, in the heat and not getting anywhere. Probably starting him, Gino, and Lady probably start thinking, "Fuck, we've got a boat full of clients here. How long is this going to go on for?" So they were probably, but nobody showed it, but I was dead calm. I just knew I'll come out of the wash, little test. So I was bailing out the water with the bucket because it was starting to, because all the boats leak to a degree. So just help him out while he's still fucking around with it. And I got involved with the, trying the different plug, and they were clean and whatnot. So it was just a fucking fuck about, really. But eventually, so everyone fucked off onto this island except me and Lady. And they started walking on this island to get a break, stretch their legs. Fucked my back line in that boat, unfortunately, for a bit later in the day. But anyway, eventually it did start up, so we had to go to the top of the island. Gino was miles away, probably trying to get a signal on his radio, which he didn't. But then we picked him up. And so anyway, it was just an interesting start to the day. So by the time we got back straight to lunch, it was 1 o'clock, but it wasn't a big meal too. So I was thinking, oh, fucking have a big heavy meal on my stomach but it was beans and I couldn't resist it. And it was pasta, so it was really heavy but tasty. So that was the start of the ceremony day. But we had cashew juice, which I've got a note because it's gorgeous. Cashew fruit juice in the blender. Wow, what a drink. Of course, being thirsty after being in the sun for so long. So anyway, the ceremony. Me, Brandon and Colin arrived first, and we didn't know whether Pam and Carlos were going to turn up. I was kind of hoping in some ways that they wouldn't, because we had a good, nice ceremony, just the three of us, the previous time. So, but when they did turn up, Colin went to move, and I said, "Oh, you better not just yet. Stay next to me and leave them the other two beds so they can be next to each other if they do turn up," and they did. So, but Joshua didn't again. He's been very busy this week, it seems. Probably got a lot on his plate. I've hardly spoken to him, just to say hello. That's it. So anyway, they came, and the first cup again didn't affect me at all. I think, oh fuck, here we go. Well, what's going on with these late ceremonies all the time recently? Obviously there's a lot of work going on just spiritually after the ceremony, for the 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. This one wasn't too bad after, but I was still being worked on, stomach, shit in my stomach. But anyway, before we get to that, because it doesn't matter. Late in the night, finally did go for a crap before being able to sleep, and I did drop off earlier than usual, as did Colin. He said so. We didn't. The tripping wasn't as heavy. We could walk. I was a bit wobbly because still coming up toward the end. I was in a peak by then because nothing happened for the first cup. It did for the rest, I assume, definitely Brendan and Colin. And then Brendan puked right before the second cup was offered. But, I knew I had to have one because nothing was happening for me. So I had the second cup. It's probably a bit less than half, between a half and a third. So I just drank it with just a tiny amount left in the bottom, but not a lot. Because I wanted it, because I was in this space. I was starting to get a bit pissed off sort of state, thinking, oh fucking hell, what am I going to, and I couldn't get, it wasn't strong enough to get anything. There were no fractals, there was no connection with Mama, there was just nothing happening for me. I thought, well, here we go again, another late one. This is like the last 4 or 5, it's just getting a bit, what's going on. Maybe it's the dietas or whatever. And obviously it's just the cleaning you require. That's the upshot of it. Mama's controlling it, even before ceremony, during the day, all of these things. Like I've said to the guys, this is a component of it. You'll start to realize that the synchronicities that happen, and this was really key for me. A couple of things that had happened in the last 24 hours in videos that I've been watching on YouTube, things that have cropped up, memories or whatever, and then just little, like a sentence in a video, then crops up in the ceremony as part of trying to find the answer to something. Fascinating stuff. But anyway, unpleasant because of this mood, and the irritability started to build because I was like in this weird half physically straight space where I could sit up and look out the window. I could feel the ayahuasca working on the first cup, but just a little bit, but not to kick you into the spiritual space, nowhere near it. So I was kind of like in this half limbo of like, what the fuck is this? What's going on here? This was new. And then we got to the first break, another Icaro after the usual point, an hour or two in, where the second cup's offered. Of course, yeah, I'm sitting up, right, ready, come on, just fucking got to get it. And then Colin had it, which is a great. And then Brendan said yes, but he puked right before. And he said this morning that as soon as he took, as soon as it hit its lips, he felt like vomiting. And then the message was, no, don't have any more. And he said, he just wanted to nurture the good stuff that he had from the first ceremony. So that was interesting. Colin had a really heavy had vomit. The second vomit was really heavy. And I'm sitting there later on after I was kicked into space, into spiritual space. But before I got there, I drank the second cup, still had this massive feeling of irritability. And then it started to hit straight away. And the irritability got worse. And then Carlos and Pamela, they didn't do a second cup. And it fucked me right off because they started smoking shit. Like, Carlos has got these horrible fucking cigars. They smell like normal cigars. He said they're white Mapacho, but I've never smelled, and they stink, and I hate the smell of normal cigars. So they were sitting up after the second cup, probably had their little effect, and then Pamela was putting a blanket over her knees and turning a light on. And because I was in this irritable mood, I was kind of sitting up and look at them and kind of, the fuck are you doing? Disrupting a ceremony like this once it's actually just really kicking in for everybody. And the smell of the tobacco. And then I got a whiff of Palo Santo, and they did this twice. And I was really fucked off because and it was all deliberate. Mama were doing something specifically that came to light for later, which was really important and fascinating. So I'm really fucked off with these guys. But the initial thing was a paranoia too, because I'd watched Graham Hancock's videos a week or so ago on psychic vampires. And of course, because of their behavior up till now, not doing ceremonies and stuff, just saying, oh, we're in a process, I had this paranoid image. They were a pair of shamans, like possibly overseeing the ceremony unbeknownst to everybody and maybe to feed off other people's energy. So I had this going through my head as well. So this was part of a negative emotion process, prejudging people. But I didn't know that at the time because I was saying, eventually Mama did make herself present. And I was, what the fuck is going on here? So fucking annoyed. Because it's disrespectful. It's selfish. There's no thought of how you're, whatever the fuck you're smoking, different herbs and shit. And I was watching Carlos, I put my head up again, and he had this massive fat fucking thing. That one didn't smell, fortunately, but whether it's herbs or what, I don't know. But I definitely got a whiff of Palo Santo, and I fucking hate that shit. It's a wood that's for spiritual cleansing. It's used in incense in Catholic churches that they swing. That's what they use or can do for energy clearance, but it stinks to me. I can't breathe on it. And when I spoke to the lads this morning, before they came down to breakfast, the other two came down to breakfast, I mentioned about it, and they said, both of them said, yeah, I didn't like that, what they were smoking, made me feel uncomfortable, but kind of just put up with it. But for me, it was horrible. And then with that, again, that disrespect thing, because of my strong morals, it's like, you fucking selfish pair of cunts. But it was done for a reason, as everything is. Because as I kept saying, what the fuck is going on? I had to go through this whole process for ages. Like, what are they? Are they dark shamans, psychic vampires? Which is what happened to Graham Hancock's wife. Somebody blew in their face. They were trying to extract her energy, even as a 72-year-old. Worth watching. You'll have to just Google. I'll try and find it because it's an interesting chat with Hancock with a group of Americans. Talking about that one particular ayahuasca ceremony that he did. So, and that was new. So, of course, for me, as knowledge, having people, these dark, shitty people that are probably dabbling in shamanism who turn up at ayahuasca ceremonies, very rare again, but it exists. turning up in ayahuasca ceremonies to just basically suck on people's energy and drain their own youth effectively, and can make them ill, which is what happened to Hancock's wife. She had ended up with what's the rash called? Been in the news recently, you know the one I mean, herpes thing. Can't think what it's called now. So after, because he touched her and he blew into her face, like as if putting a fucking spell on her. So both of them were heavily affected by that, and his wife was ill. So that was going through my head, but then later it was resolved by Mama saying, "Well, your initial feelings about them, why they didn't do ceremonies, was what?" I said, "Well, I just thought maybe they've got their own issues." And only in retrospect now, having seen them do the Cambo and seeing the dirt that came out of Carlos, that bright green vomit from the bile, and also Pamela's effect of not being able to handle it and actually passing out temporarily with their head in the bucket. So if they were shamans, they'd have been able to handle that, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, they must have had I was trying to watch at the beginning how much Maestro gave them as their first ceremony, and it is the usual, just like maybe a third of a cup or less, because he has to gauge them. So I was trying to think telepathically to Maestro, sort of like, can you see what the fuck's going on here? Because I'm really disturbed by this. I was wondering if with his power, whether he's aware that, oh, these guys are interesting. What the fuck are they up to? But I haven't spoken to him. But I won't mention it now because it resolved itself, because it was part of this cleaning of me. But anyway, it was really unpleasant. And then this had set my mood, so I was angry and fucking irritable. Every noise. And then next thing, Segundo, the dog, came trotting over, barked, and then he's been, just the last week, he's never done it before. He does it on the door outside my room sometimes after ceremony, where he's scratching at the door because he wants to come in near the company and lie outside the rooms. But he did this outside the ceremony last night, and I'm next to the door, and it was super fucking loud, and he wouldn't stop. And then this made Antonio get up, so he's opening the door. I say, Paddy, really slow, stop. So this is really, really heavily hit me. So this heavily hit me as another irritation, and then this caused, when he came back in, him and Lady were talking too loud, whispering too loud and for too long. I was getting to this point, and then a mosquito got let in this process that went straight for my ear, and I'm like, just getting fucking Jesus, and it was just too much in a short space of time. I pulled the blanket over my head, and I was just feeling like getting to this point of just feeling like, for fuck's sake, you people, will you fucking be quiet? Obviously, you're never going to say that in a ceremony, but it was literally to that point. So very unpleasant. So anyway, it came back to just kind of, Mama, something cropped up about, was it a question? Yeah, it came back to this irritability thing, and Louise, the vision, the static image from my video of Holiday in Crete, where me and Louise had this I'd made a comment, and she was just looking at me, eating crisps, like as if, I don't know what she was thinking because of what I said, but she was cool about it. It was related to her boss, who I thought was a bit lecherous, because obviously Louise was like the prettiest girl in the whole group. Obviously, I'd say that, but she was. And so she had a lead role in these ballets for the Nutcracker. She played the girl in the Nutcracker suite for Christmas. And because of that role, because of her prettiness, and you think of voyeurism with like an older guy who runs the company, even though one of the older dancers was his girlfriend, this sort of thing. So this was like there. And again, Mama saying about this history that I mentioned in the last one, not being able to remember 8 years of a relationship with Louise. And she's going, what happened? The same as the other night. This is like third ceremony where this has cropped up. She's asked it sometimes in other contexts. What happened? So for this one again, we're revisiting this stuff, and because I'm irritable, and then the ayahuasca's really kicked in at this point, but I'm not in a space where it's been usual after the shivers, which I did have, to get the bodily stuff out first before you then kind of calm into a spiritual space, because there's physical cleaning involved to get rid of, you know, past trauma aspects and stuff. So anyway, got to this, and I was kind of feeling a little bit brain foggy at this point, and Mama asked me what happened, as if like, think about it. I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. You keep bringing up, I don't know now. She said, if your life depended on this question, you had to answer it, for example, what would you do? Oh, it's like you resign yourself in. So, oh, for fuck's sake, she's not going to drop this one. So it's like, okay, first principles. First of all, foundations of ayahuasca. Regain control. Get your headspace clear. So, right. She said, yep. Set your fire, light your fire, lit the fire. Get into that tranquil space. Come into the space in your head. Now, you got control again. What happened? And then the same image of the black hole in like this side of my head. That's the subconscious. And it's just a black hole, like a big, long, super long black sack, pitch black, which I'd been in other ceremonies, dived in and pulled a jewel out from that mythological stuff of Jordan Peterson's, where Jonah and the whale, that kind of thing. It's symbolic of going down into the darkness to solve a problem and come away with the treasure that represents coming back to the light with something of value that you've brought from this dark subconscious. And this was amazing. So I'm effectively sitting inside this black hole of subconscious. It's pitch black in there. Every time I've been in there, it's pitch black. And you're kind of looking. Sometimes then you see things that are just images, like things floating by, just odd things. Can be like musical notes or just whatever, as they're floating to the surface. As you're sitting in the middle and things are coming at you, that's not what you're there for. You're looking for something specific to answer this question about this period of my life. What happened? Now, this was brilliant, because earlier in that day, because of the video I did on Richard Grannon, I've been watching a couple more of his stuff, so they're coming in on my feeds. And this one cropped up, which I've sent to people, about complex post-traumatic stress, and relating to the author of the book called Surviving to Thriving, Complex Post-Traumatic Stress, which I'd read. It's the first book I read, I think, when I found it. When I started looking, realizing learning a bit of psychology and being put onto that book, and it was the first one. Of course, then the author's name rang a bell when Grannon mentioned it. I thought, and then he mentioned the title. I thought, oh yeah, that's one I read 5 years ago. But I'd completely forgotten something really important in it. I'd not thought about it since, and this was what the whole thing was about. It was amazing, because she said to me in the ceremony, what did Grannon explain so well in that video today? What was the term he used? And I'm digging around in my sort of foggy memory. I can't think of it. Slowly. Because this happens a lot when you're in conversation. Some words, you just can't think of the words. Chasing around because your memories or your brain's being worked on and re-overwritten and stuff. And sometimes there's gaps in just words are missing, and you can't think what the word is. It takes time because like your memory's all scrambled. So I was trying to think of this term that he'd used, and it was emotional dysregulation. And Mama went, excellent. And the next thing, this kind of octopus, very mild octopusy shape started to form and float away from me. And then it turned into, in the Avatar movie, it turned into that little floating nice, pretty sort of jellyfish thing floating. You know, in the film The Avatar, where that little flower, the seed of the tree of life, is kind of just floating and it all lands on the character's arm, the main character, where there's the realization that he's special. So it was one of those little things. And it was floating away, but it had this black cord string, like cotton thin, not that thick, but just a black string. And it was extracting it out of the subconscious and floating to the out, where the surface of the subconscious would be. And after that, all of the feelings of, because we found it, you know, Mum said, there it is, you've got it. There's it, part of it being removed. Excellent. That is your irritability and your anger, part of it, that's so deep rooted, that's come from your complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which caused, this is what this is about. It's about your emotional dysregulation in the past, where when you've gone into depressions, because your mood swings, Grannon explains it if you watch that video, this, you know, where you go extremist, which is what I used to call myself. I used to think of myself as an extremist because I was either full on, almost drunk, happy, manic kind of thing, or so fucking low. And that's emotional dysregulation. It's too extreme. And that's what happens with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So it was absolutely beautiful in the end. So then, once that was clear and my mood changed and I went back to just being calm because we got this thing, this was like fucking amazing. It's like great. So then she said, so how do you feel now about the situation with Paola and Carlos? And I said, I'm still not sure about that though. You know, there's still that aspect of what they could be. Because I wasn't remembering some other stuff of my first judgments of them. And she said, remember judgment, Steve? Prejudgment, you know, about people. I was like, yeah. So what do you think of it now? I said, well, I'm still not sure. You know, because it's been an unpleasant experience and they've been a major part of it. And she said, Occam's razor, what's the principle? I said, the simplest explanation is most likely the correct one. Yeah, exactly. So now what? What's the probable, most simple explanation? Yeah, I said, well, it goes back to my original feelings about them, which was they've been a bit reluctant, maybe a little bit of anxiety and fear, feeling that they have to be right. And she said, of course, I made all of this happen to get to this really important aspect of all the remaining psychologies, the dark psychologies that you still have, that we're working on all the time with you. Back in your room in Iquitos, the barking dog, massive irritation, but you're under the influence of ayahuasca and the dieta. That's why you've been exposed to that. I put you in that room, obviously through Ida, for exactly that to happen. I brought Segundo. I made him bark. And you know, you've seen shamans, the previous nasty shaman, you saw him sing an Icaro to drunk Santos when he was mouthing off outside of your ceremony because he was pissed. And you saw that maestro, shaman, sing an Icaro at him and shut him up completely and walk him straight to bed. So you know the mind control capabilities. So she said, I did that with a dog. I said, yeah, everything was me. Her, you know, to get to the bottom of this aspect, because it's really important aspect of the negativity. It drives, it's still there, there's still a lot to be worked on, but we've got the cause. The subconscious has been brought from the subconscious to be balanced with the conscious, and it's a really, really important part. So, back to the question, what happened? I said, yeah, I know now. I just never thought of it in those terms. The complex post-traumatic stress disorder for me, causing emotional dysregulation and sliding further and further into deep depressions, was the root cause of my negative feelings toward the end, because obviously your perception's completely scrambled. So it affected my relationship with Louise. So, and that was my problem, because she didn't want to end the relationship. I finished it, and then she said, "Then the dark influences were attacking you. You wanted a change, because you're in such a level of unhappiness. You reflected it, you projected it onto Louise in a way, which wasn't her fault. But being so young, I was only 28 at the time. She was 25. We're just young kids. We don't really, we don't know anything about all this stuff. Certainly didn't know anything about what's really going on, because complex post-traumatic stress in Grannon, he was talking about that book. Another doctor who was she was the person to coin the phrase complex post-traumatic stress disorder. She was a Harvard professor who described those terms and tried to get it into the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which it still isn't, but it's in another literature. And as he explains, there's different camps. But, like all of these things in psychology, there's lots of different camps, because all of these symptoms overlap specifically across narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, and sociopathy. They have many traits in common, as do all mental health issues. There are crossovers between many of them, and it's psychology's best job. That's why it's not an exact science. A lot of it has to be interpretation and personal opinion by those who've studied it to a high level that create the rules for treatment. So it's all fascinating. If you're interested in that, you can read The Meaning of Madness. Can't think of the author now, who explains psychology in those terms, basically as a practice, and how it's been organized through the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Trying to put everything in the box as a starting point, because you have to, but then obviously realizing that there's boxes cross over with each other and stuff. So anyway, that was fascinating. So this basically meant that it was inevitable, because of the level of complex post-traumatic stress that I suffered, because of the trauma that I suffered, right from the moment I was born. And then that also linked into seeing my mother in her youth, and mum saying, "Yeah, well, from talking to your brother how histrionic she was when she was younger, throwing pots of tea over my father when she's got a tantrum on, and the general controlling nastiness of how she's basically destroyed the two sisters by narcissism, obviously infecting the children." I said that was effectively what my skill set was being able to withstand it for so long, and be the one most corrupted in terms of destroying my own life as a result of that, of the effects of it. But luckily enough, escaping being infected to become a narcissist myself. So basically, me and Terry escaped that the two sisters didn't, because that's what narcissists do. And of course, the same thing has happened with both of those sisters, but specifically the other one, the younger one, completely, abusing her three girls and creating another narcissist from the first one, the oldest, in her own image. Because that's what narcissism does. It propagates itself, because on a spiritual level, as I said to Mike about his father, narcissists have a vortex of negative energy that attracts the dark forces. And this is the way it works on a spiritual level. So it was a fascinating ceremony in that respect. So, but nevertheless, thinking about it, I do still have to, because it's part of, you can't bottle stuff. It has to be out in the open. So I will mention just to Pam and Carlos before tomorrow's ceremony, because it's the last one for me for a long time, possibly 6 weeks. I want it to be a good one. It's the end of the week for the guys, and knowing now that they felt uncomfortable with the smoking, I will say to them and just say, look guys, do you mind not smoking once the ceremony has started? immediately after I smoke on the patio to get rid of the taste, but the ceremony, the effects haven't started yet. They don't come in for half an hour. And I'll just say to them, please, it's really disturbing for other people. I can't breathe with that stuff. So if you don't mind, once the ceremony is underway, please don't smoke anything in the ceremony, whatever it is you're smoking, because it has a detrimental effect on other clients, especially me. And I'll just say it in those terms really, and just but it has to come from me, I think, just to talk to them on their own. Because my initial thoughts were, I'm going to talk to Ivan about this, because when I was so irritable, this is fucking out of order. The fucking ceremony, smoking whatever the fucking stinky shit is you're smoking. So it really pissed me off. But it was to get to the bottom of the irritability. So again, Mama controlled. It was all planned, like she does all the time. I've explained to the new guys. You come to the realization that things that happen in a retreat during the day are done for a reason. And she said, yeah, and that's the other really great bit, which would be just right to finish. I'd asked her in the previous ceremony and not got the answer. Remember about Grannon's other video about his first ayahuasca experience? And of course, then because of this, I was in the mood of saying, oh, you're not going to tell me anyway, so I'm not going to fucking bother asking again. And she just said, yeah, it was her talking to Grannon. I went, what? She said, yeah. I said, what, but the harsh content as well, and the 9 others? She said, yeah, well, I knew that I was going to feed you the video and get your reaction to it, to make you think about it, bring Grannon back into your feed so I could feed you the video of his complex post-traumatic stress, because you'd click on it. It's like you feel like you just puppeteered. It's amazing. All for your benefit, of course, So I said, yeah, but talking to him that harshly and telling him, like, what the fuck are you doing here? You need to get out. What do you do? What's your job? He said, I help people. Well, what the fuck are you here for then? And I said, why the harshness? He said, because he doesn't need ayahuasca, as I told him. Because he's already doing her work unbeknownst to him. And he's doing a fantastic job of it. And that's why she just wanted him to continue to do that, because he's awakening a lot of people to the issues of complex post-traumatic stress, the effects of narcissism on them, as they find out about their damage. And eventually, if it brings them to ayahuasca, they'll find out, like me, about the actual forces behind it. So they have a much better understanding and a worldview on those forces of what they're doing globally. So just amazing. So I said, yeah, the 9 others though. She said, yeah, but I knew that would make you doubt that it was me doing it, up so that we could get to this point for this night specifically. So, about the emotional dysregulation. So she planned the whole thing. I said, yeah, a bit harsh on Grannon. She said, yeah, but he's doing a fantastic job. Look how eloquently he explained those 3 traits, or the 3 things to watch out for, which was especially a requirement for tonight's healing for me. So it was wonderful. I said, a bit nasty though. So it's necessary because it wasn't, I needed him to not come back to ayahuasca because he's doing a brilliant job of what he's doing. That's his role, unbeknownst to him. So again, the mysteriousness of how she works, it's just absolutely, I said to the guys when I explained it to them at breakfast this morning, of what my brief version of my ceremony about that whole thing about finding and explaining for Colin's benefit, because obviously I know he's got a lot of trauma. And that's just another thing that's really important. When I first met him, we had a conversation. He was very open. He was talking about the use of marijuana and saying since he stopped a month or what before coming, because you have to, because this also links back to why marijuana is not a master plant. So when he was telling me about starting to dream again, because he on marijuana, he said you don't dream. And of course I said that's really interesting, because it's really important to dream, from what I've looked at about sorry, head's foggy again, I'm hungry. Yeah, so dreaming about being able to access the subconscious, because it's important, because if you're not dreaming, those symbolic messages from this Jungian subconscious can't give you warnings and give you weird dreams. So he's had loads and loads of weird dreams since he's been here, because they're working again. And I said, that's really interesting. I said, because I always wondered why within the ayahuasca and the plant spirit community that marijuana isn't regarded as a master plant. Although it's got certain medicinal properties, yeah. And for the West, who don't know anything about other plant medicine, spiritual plant medicines, it might be enough to just get people through their difficulties, but it blocks memory, and it stops spiritual access in various respects. Not all of them, but some of the important ones for healing, because it's an escapism. So it's not dealing with the issue. So that made a lot of sense. And then that was clarified last night about why it's not a master plan, but with a deeper understanding of what's necessary to heal, of getting stuff out of the Jungian subconscious into the conscious mind and be balanced. Individuation. So that was just a wonderful ceremony in that respect, but it was hard to go through like 3 hours of fucking horrible anger, fucking irritability, like fuck. In a ceremony, never had that before. But then the resolution was just pure, miraculous magic, wonderful stuff. And then basically we all managed to walk back. Antonio gave me a bit of a hand, but I could walk pretty well, but a bit wobbly, but nothing. And got back to the room. It wasn't so trippy, but I still had that kind of, from what I'd been set off, I did have a really uncomfortable feeling in my stomach because it's confrontation, which is another thing that's gone unvented in most of my life because of being suppressed. If you don't vent your feelings, they'll turn inward, you know. So that's why there was such discomfort in my stomach, and I had to wait a good couple of hours, eat an apple and a banana to try and push things through before I could go to the toilet and then really relax. But I did manage to, I dropped off not long after that. There was occasional conversation with Mama, but the trip wasn't really that heavy compared to like the previous nights. So it wasn't long, because that lesson was done for the night. That whole ceremony was about getting to the bottom of this really serious side effect of complex post-traumatic stress. And we did go into a little bit about that sensitivity of like your nerve endings being so sensitive, because obviously the things that were disturbing me, you're on such a massive heightened sensitivity level, hearing, feeling irritable. And I've been like that so many times in my real life in the past. And she said, look what that does to the nervous system. The stress levels on it are massive, and that's why people have nervous breakdowns, because your body cannot handle that level of sensitivity with negative emotion behind it, and being irritable with people and things, and creating even worse as it spirals into a negative cycle of darkness. And that's why you've had 5 nervous breakdowns, because you've been completely inundated. She said it's remarkable, actually. She said we've had to step in so many times with you as they tried to fucking completely, your body before you came, your essence, your whole being was just riddled. And she said to me, as you realized a couple of years ago, the terminology for a dark energy infestation is it's a spiritual cancer, and because it feeds off the energy that's produced by your spirit occupying the body. The body is driven by this motor car, as I've said before, but the spirit's inside and but it actually creates a different type of energy, a bit like the Force in Star Wars. You can think of it like that. The midi-chlorians, it pervades all life and is the energy source to enable biological life to grow and just to exist. And that's the energy that's produced as a byproduct of the spirit. You can think of the spirit as a point source of energy in what science talks about now, but it is different because it's spiritual energy and it's different dimensional stuff. But it's a point source, so it's like it's as long lasting as a fusion reactor. That's why she said, you can just put your flame on anytime. You're not using it up or anything. It's not a battery. It's a continuous source of energy. But it actually creates an intermediary stage of energy that feeds your cells for life to occur. And that's what the dark energy is feeding off, is the energy produced by the spirit. So just interesting. I mean, who knows, whether it's real or not. But these are the things that, this is how ayahuasca works for you as insights. So, yeah, just generally. Oh, yeah, and it was. Oh, yeah, she did use trying, because I was so irritable. I was so easily distracted by things going on because everything just annoyed me. And that was just part of the calming process when she said about, regain. Later on, she said, if you bring the company in, the female company of that beautiful elven goddess type image. But it got broken up a lot. So she was, recurred on a couple of occasions again. And then basically just being back here in the room and in bed. Everybody was quiet last night. I think everybody, we didn't. It was very subdued after the. I mean, people were talking okay, but it wasn't like the previous night where everyone's like, "Wow," because Colin went through a very personal, deep one relating to his dead father, who'd never seen his baby, and he got to talk to him, so that was lovely. He felt like he's still not got a connection with Mama, but he's kind of becoming aware that the images are the conversation, even if Mama's not talking directly to him. And obviously Brandon's that was his second ceremony. And for him now, because he's clean, he's got away, he's got what he's required to go away with on Friday. And basically he was told again, yeah, you only need to do one cup on Friday. It was a lesson in you that don't do the other cup for you at the moment. Because like I said, as soon as it hit his lips, he just felt like vomiting, so he didn't drink it. Really interesting. I've never come across that before. So there's been so many new experiences just on the last few retreats for all the different people, and for me in many ways too. So we're really starting to hopefully really work on the trapped dark shit that plagues me when I'm back in Iquitos or just in general life, the general malaise and lack of interest. But she kind of said about, she said, look, from your dowsing days with Mike and Hamish Miller in the book, saying at a quantum level you can't predict the future. There's too many variables. She said, and obviously now she said, now you know my limitations, that I'm part of the construct too. That's why I can't answer some of your questions, which we went through in that really heavy. She said, I don't know everything, that we went through in that really heavy faith crisis video. So and that's why it's really important to just don't bother asking the question. And before I know now that there's certain questions as they pop into my head and just go, I'm not going to bother asking it, Mama, I know there's no answer. So it's it's just a beautiful thing. You just can't begin to imagine what ayahuasca is in those terms. It's just a miracle. How the whole thing could come about at the level of depth that it can put people through in this mind space of the human brain, with such a level of complexity, but with just all about healing you and making you a better person so that you can live a better life for yourself and have a better attitude outwards. But it's not for everybody, up until maybe, probably you can think of it in those terms too, where the travel restrictions are just sent to Joe. Glenn Beck has got a really good channel. He's an old news anchor from way back. Had to go private because of his views, because he was going to be kicked off CNN or whoever he used to work for, Fox or whatever it was. So he does a lot of good content and about the travel restrictions that are in the pipeline. So I think thinking it in terms of the dark energy plans, and this, that will be a major kick in the nuts for international travelers who find themselves as things get worse and worse and collapsing under the pressure, feeling that they need to come to ayahuasca to fix it. The dark energies are obviously, they're aware of it, they know it all. Mum has said it many times, about this whole thing. She's the equivalent of the dark side. They're just perpetually playing this game. They can't affect each other because their powers are limited in that respect. Otherwise, the overall game in the program, for whatever ludicrous reason that is, as she said in the last videos, the mind of the great creator, why it was created like this. And I agree with you in some respects, that, yeah, it's bonkers, but it is what it is. And you'll never have an answer to it, so don't ask the question. That's what faith is, isn't it?